Today on the iRacing Downshift, Chris has an identity crisis.
All right, I'm changing my name to Garrison Keeler Jr. III.
I give bad directions. I can't tell you where I want you to go. And Kevin trolls our forums.
Hashtag soon.
All that and more. So strap in. Welcome to the iRacing Downshift. I'm your host, Greg West. I'm here with the boys, Kevin, Bobbitt, and Chris Leone. We have a great show for you. Show number 11. We've got the Porsche Esports Supercup. We're going to talk about Rogers clinching his title. We're going to talk about the BMW Driving Experience 120 at Road Atlanta this weekend that had a couple of celebrity guest drivers. Nims tips, the real-world recap, and the week ahead brought to you by the one and only Chris Leone. How you doing, Chris?
I am doing fine, Greg. Just been tying up quite a bit of stuff related to IRX that I can't wait to touch on later in the show.
Kevin, how was your weekend?
It was excellent. It was good to be back home in America. I've been traveling a lot, doing cool iRacing things around Germany and other parts of the world. So it's been good. Good to be home.
And you're going back to Germany for the third time in 2 months.
Yeah, I got another trip coming up, but it's all good stuff. Things are looking up for us.
And you didn't need me to be your bag boy?
No.
Or chauffeur?
No.
I'll get a flat tire again, won't I?
Yeah, you're not allowed on any trips anymore.
You have dual citizenship yet?
Soon enough.
Soon enough. Hashtag soon.
Let's get this party started. This week in iRacing, we had the Porsche Esports Supercup. Josh Rogers clinches the title in an incredibly exciting finale. Chris, tell us about it.
Oh, man. This Porsche Esports Supercup season, this first season of this championship, has just been nothing short of phenomenal. Throughout the entire year, we had tons of title drama coming into the last race because, as consistent as Josh Rogers has been, Max Benecke has really poured on the heat the last few rounds and managed to win his second feature of the season to really keep it close. I mean, if there was one more race in the championship, we might have seen a different champion than the one that we have. But Josh Rogers did everything he needed to do. He qualified fastest, ended up starting 8th with the inversion, but still won the sprint race to set himself up for that feature. Still,
Well, interestingly enough, that was his first sprint race win of the year.
Because he's been too busy qualifying on pole.
Yeah,
exactly.
Here's a guy that everybody's he's going to win the championship, but he hadn't actually gotten a sprint race win, so he'd never gotten max points or anything.
Right, and I don't think anybody did get max points during the season. I think the theoretical max was really 150 for winning the sprint and the feature, but Josh Rogers proved, yes, it is possible to qualify on that pole, pass 7 cars, and be able to win a sprint race. But he managed his car very well during the feature. I mean, there was definitely a good amount of drama there and some changing positions.
Him and Job. I mean, that was really that tight racing, going in the chicane, a little bit of contact, but it's door-to-door racing. It didn't look like it affected the outcome of the race, so I wasn't super concerned with that. But I was just surprised to see Josh, who sitting in 4th at the time, had the championship wrapped up as long as he just hit the cruise control. He's like, no, I'm going to go try to win this race. And I mean, I kind of can respect that a little bit.
He's a racer through and through, for sure. You see that at the live events we've done with him in Frankfurt, Leipzig. He's a solid racer. Means a lot to him. He's passionate about it. Same can be said for all the guys, especially at the front of the field. It really was great racing all season. I think I held my breath for about 90 minutes on Saturday morning, just hoping for a good race. We got a good race. A worthy champion. Quite frankly, any of those guys would have been worthy champions. They've represented the series, iRacing, Porsche, esports in general very well. Really excited for what's coming. The series will continue next year. Working on some things to make it even bigger and better, but hashtag soon on some announcements, and but it's going to be even better next year.
Going back to the race, what was also pretty exciting for me as I was sitting there in the YouTube chat was seeing all 4 of the drivers that had a chance of winning it near the top of the field and really duking it out there at the end. Obviously, Josh had a big points advantage coming in, so there wasn't quite as much drama, but like I said a little while ago, they were still racing pretty hard, Chris.
Yeah, and I mean, the gap still closed out to about 18 or 20 points after the feature race. So it wasn't as if it wasn't within striking distance or if Josh hadn't had some sort of error. But going back to what you said, credit to him for not laying up there, not just taking his foot off the gas and putting it on cruise control. I mean, the difference between screwing that up and not screwing that up would have been about $10,000, and I'm sure he's much happier to have $28,000 than about the $17,000 or so that Max Benecke took home. But regardless, I mean, it is all the respect in the world to anybody who is going to race it out every single race and not just try to sit on a points lead and ride it out like that.
It's been really cool to see how involved Porsche has been with this series. These are not guys that just are title sponsors and sit back and enjoy the show. Every week we have multiple calls with them, exchanging emails. How can we make it better? What can we do just to increase the exposure? And we've done a lot with them in 2019. I think, Kevin, you're probably the best person to talk about it since you keep having to fly across the pond to work with them. But let's take a look back. Walk us through, all these things that we've done with Porsche in 2019.
Yeah, well, I guess it goes back to 2018. We had the event in Leipzig in December, so it's almost 2019. But that came together really quickly. Invited a bunch of drivers over there. Had a first live event with Porsche. Went really well. Got a lot of learnings out of it. Announced the Porsche Esports Supercup there. I don't think we even had the official name at that point, but we knew we were doing the series. We were able to announce it live, which was cool. Then, of course, the series. We ran another live event at the Sim Racing Expo at the Nürburgring. And then, of course, the Frankfurt Auto Show, which was just a couple of weeks ago, which I think we covered on the last podcast. But each one of those events, you've seen measurable improvements in terms of not just driving, but the event and how it's presented. RaceSpot's been a huge partner of ours on that. Will and his team, Hugo, all the guys. There's people behind the scenes that are doing technical stuff. There's the voices that you hear, the calling the races. It's really a team effort, and everybody has really stepped up their game.
I don't think people realize how big of a team RaceSpot is. It's just not one or
It's
two
not just
guys
Will,
in
right?
their basement. No, I mean, they have a whole arsenal of people that are involved to make those broadcasts as professionally as they do come off, and I'm just excited to see where it goes as we move into 2020. What really excites me is when I post the link on my Facebook or Twitter and I have friends watch it, and they can't tell if it's a real race or if it's a sim race, and that's a great direction that we can.
Especially when you're talking about somebody winning $28,000, it's like, well, that's a real haul of cash. That's serious money. So,
speaking of big prizes, let's talk about the BMW Driving Experience 120 at Road Atlanta that we had this weekend with our other awesome partners, BMW. We had 36 teams, 72 drivers. Nikki Katzberg and Jesse Krohn, our factory drivers from BMW, participated.
They made the top split.
They did make the top split, and they also were, congratulations, the first people to be removed from the race for disqualification after wrecking out and going over the incident
Too
limit.
many incidents. It happens even to the pros, right?
But Max Benecke, speaking of the devil, Max Benecke and Max Wing, did I say that right?
I don't know.
I don't know. Sorry, Max.
We'll find out soon.
Yeah. Somebody will correct me, I'm sure. But they come home with the prize. And Kevin, tell our viewers what they won.
So they get a great driving experience through BMW in a GT4 car in Germany. Date to be determined, I guess. But what an opportunity to get in a real car and see if you can actually do it.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun for them to drive those laps. I know Max was already tweeting about it as soon as he won. I think he was happier about that than the money he brought home from the Porsche Esports Supercup.
I don't know. Cash is still king, but both are cool prizes for sure.
That's a big weekend right there.
Yeah, he had
Huge.
Yeah.
Max
Not
Benecke
bad.
had a good week. Yeah. All right, moving on. Let's talk about USAC. Chris, catch us up.
3 races into the USAC season right now. David Heilemann is the driver to beat, and we've seen him with the winged sprint cars be one of the best drivers in the series. I think he was 3rd in points there, but goes back-to-back in the last 2 USAC rounds, the most recent victory being at Limaland. And, it's funny, the last interview that he did after taking that most recent victory, he was saying, man, I was warning my team, guys, we got to watch out for the bull rings. We got to watch out for the quarter miles. Stuff happens, and it happens quickly. And lo and behold, he comes out with 3 podiums, and now he's going into the tracks that he likes. So
That's scary.
That's a little dangerous, isn't it? I mean, there's a guy who has been, just at the front of the pack, like I said, all season long. And it's been really cool to see this iRacing USAC World Championship presented by Flow Racing. The drivers it's brought out. But the drivers it's brought out, I mean, we've seen some of the best of the winged sprint cars. We've seen some of the best dirt late model drivers. I mean, Zach Leonardi, our inaugural late model world champion, has been one of the best drivers in these non-winged sprint cars as well. So it's really cool to see the best of the best dirt oval guys all in one place with a car that all of them say is one of the wildest to drive on iRacing. And
Wildest, impossible. I feel like they're kind of synonymous. I have no idea how these guys drive.
Can't wait till we get that car in the throw and go.
Oh gosh, you just want to tease it, don't you?
I just want to tease the throw and go.
Just want to tease it.
Yeah. That comes later, folks.
Not yet.
Stay tuned.
Not yet. Soon.
Soon.
Hashtag soon. All right, moving on. Let's talk about Nims tips. This every week, Nim Cross, our chief steward at iRacing, gives some tips on how to put yourself in a better position on the track and with protests, et cetera, et cetera. This week, we're going to talk about something that has been a little bit of a discussion on the forums. It's the cars with the new tire Model 7. So you're talking about the Skippy, you're talking about the F3, the TCR, for example, and how to give yourself a better opportunity in turn one versus just going in there like a bowling ball and ending up on Nim's desk. So with the new tire model, you do have to allow the tires to get up to temperature before they have maximum grip, more so than in the past. And what Nim was talking about is practicing your start. Go figure. I know. Crazy talk. Practice backing up those braking points for that first couple laps until you get some temperature in the tires.
You mean like the real-world drivers do? Like an F1 weekend, they'll do a practice start in pit lane? You mean like practicing what's going to happen in the race? Is that your suggestion?
practice?
We're talking about practice.
Oh.
Not a game.
Not a game.
Not a game.
Silly.
We're talking about practice. On that note, though, we do have some exciting news. As we'll have an iRacing patch coming out in the near future where we are going to make a small change to the F3 car specifically. We're going to add tire warmers to it. Since for the standing starts, we do not model a formation lap within iRacing. It does not give the drivers ample opportunity to bring those tires up to temperature. So we have found out how much tire or temperature you could put in the tire during that formation lap, and we've just helped you out with that a little bit to try to clean things up a little bit on that opening lap. Up next, we have a really exciting guest, somebody that's going to regale you with all of the engineering.
That's a big word.
With all the engineering equations and the secrets of what makes iRacing what iRacing is. We have Chris Lurch, one of our vehicle dynamicists. He's going to be in here, and me and Kevin will have a fun talk with him.
It'll be interesting. He's got a fascinating kind of career. Pretty cool how he ended up here, and it's interesting to look at what he does for us. So I think listeners will be intrigued.
Without further ado, Mr. Chris Lurch. All right, I'm super excited to be sitting here with Kevin and our next guest, Chris Lurch, one of our vehicle dynamicists. Say it, Kevin. Come on.
Vehicle dynamics engineer.
Oh, Kevin can't say that word.
I can't say that word.
Chris. But Chris has agreed to join us today, kind of at the last moment, actually.
I have, yeah. Very excited to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
We
Yeah,
appreciate it. All right, Chris, so why don't you tell us what exactly a vehicle dynamicist does for iRacing?
So I work on the car physics. So I'm the guy who, or one of three guys who tries to make the cars behave like they would on a real racetrack.
So you are the man behind the curtain with all the knobs that really makes it happen that people don't really realize is.
Yeah, I create how the car behaves,
So
essentially.
you get paid to drive around in a sim all day long taking notes.
Well, that's effectively what I do. That's not necessarily what I'm paid to do, but that's kind of, as Kevin is well aware, that's a bit of what I do.
Yeah, if for those of you obviously that don't know Chris, he has the happiest looking face as he's doing his testing. He's so relaxed and just looks like he's out for a Sunday drive, and it's you hate
Although
to.
his screen's interesting though. When I drive the sim, I can see everything there. His screen is full of data, so you have a different display in the development environment, and all kinds of data streaming on the screen, and it's very distracting to me. But thankfully, you know what it all means.
Tire data, looking at tire data all the time, live.
Live telemetry.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? Where did you come from that led you to this role with iRacing? Let's talk about your previous.
So we can actually start way back at the beginning if you like, which is, so I was born outside of Chicago. We moved to upstate New York, outside of Buffalo, when I was about 8. And kind of from then until I was 18, I would spend Saturday nights at the local short track, Holland Speedway, for anybody who might recognize it out there. And
Just
also,
to be clear, that is not being scanned currently. That's not being added to iRacing.
No.
Let's not start that rumor.
It's from what I understand, is barely even in use anymore. But anyway, and also when I was 8, my dad took me to the U.S. Grand Prix at Watkins Glen.
Oh, that's cool.
And my dad he grew up in the Finger Lakes of upstate New York, and he'd been going to Watkins Glen since the very beginning. I think right around the transition between when it was a street race and when they had the permanent road course. So he'd been to Watkins Glen and seen 4 or 5 Formula One races in the 60s, Graham Hill and Innis Ireland. And so when we moved back to upstate New York when I was 8, that first year we went and saw the USGP, and Mario Andretti had just been crowned world champion and out there in the Lotus 79, and it was
very cool. Was that the year of the bus that got burned in the pit?
I think the bus was a few years earlier than that. It was in the bog. Yeah. Fortunately, I missed the bog because at age 8, I think that would have kind of scared the crap out of me. But and that was kind of a pivotal moment for me. I mean, I fell in love with Formula One and road racing and Lotus, as oddly enough at the time. But it's kind of all kind of cascaded from there. And so when I went to school, I became an engineer because I wanted to work on race cars, basically. I mean, I was good at math and science as a kid, but I can't say I was like, I got to be in the math and science. It was car racing that really drew me into it. Mm-hmm. So I went through, did my undergrad, and then I did grad school at MIT. And I was trying to kind of figure out, it wasn't obvious then how as an engineer you get to work in motorsports.
Not so, more direct pathways. There's more focused coursework these days.
Well, I think there is actually.
Yeah.
Back then it was like you're an engineer, but there was really no direct connection between the motorsports industry and engineering back then. So the decision I made was not to do racing right away. After grad school, I went and worked on acoustics for Navy submarines. So
wow.
I've spent time on a Trident sub. Pretty memorable, but for reasons.
Are you allowed to be talking about this?
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
Recently declassified.
We don't have that many listeners yet. So.
Yeah, I didn't go in the reactor room or anything, so we're good. And
down in Connecticut, is that where you did that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Groton.
Yeah. I was on the sub out in Alaska, but we did spend time on the base in Groton, and then I was going to get a PhD, and I thought, do I want to get a PhD or do I want to do racing? And so I just kind of dropped everything, got in my car, drove to Sonoma, and did the Jim Russell Mechanics Training Program at Sears Point. And I lasted there for 4 months, and then I sent my resume to an IndyCar team, and they're like, yep, come on down. Yeah, so I was at Precision Preparation Incorporated, PPI, and they were just outside of LA. So drove down to LA and camped out there for 2 years and learned to love Los Angeles. And at the end of that 2 years, my boss, who was a Formula One guy, went back to Formula One. And he offered me a job at Jaguar in the UK.
So going back to the IndyCar team, what specifically were you doing for them? What responsibilities did you have?
I wrote simulation software for them, and I also did their 7-post rig program.
I feel like that is applicable to your current job.
There's kind of a
theme.
Crossover. There's a theme that runs through my career background. Yeah, so racing and software and engineering, it's all kind of intermixed and intertwined.
How was the simulation software back then? What did that really consist of?
It consisted of code that basically did the multi-body system. So the nuts and bolts of the physics of our system, that was what I did. It
wasn't a driver in the loop sort of thing.
No, not at all. It was all done.
So they could do their race simulation, how the car was going to perform at that track.
Exactly. So we were just doing performance deltas and trying to tune the race car to get more performance out of it.
Cool. And then you went to Jaguar.
And I went to Jaguar. Lived in Milton Keynes, lovely Milton Keynes, in the UK, and there my biggest project was to write software that the race engineers could use to do analysis and setup logging. So you notice at the racetrack, oftentimes you'll see race engineers and they have their clipboard and they have their run notes. So the idea of what I was doing was to have that all be data-based. So instead of having a clipboard, they have a laptop. And as they do run changes on the car, they enter those changes in the laptop, goes into a database, and they can share that information with everybody throughout the team. And in addition, there was analysis tools that kind of lived to the side of that. So they could do ballast and aero and suspension setup. And at the time, that was, to the best of my knowledge, the first time anybody had done that in top-level motorsports.
Oh, that's super cool.
It was a cool project.
And then how long were you with Jaguar?
About 2.5 years. So I also worked on their 7-post program towards the end of my time there.
And for those of you that are listening that don't know what that is, elaborate a little more on that.
So a 7-post rig, you don't see them a whole lot anymore. I mean, they're used, but they're kind of going out of fashion. So it's essentially this rig that has hydraulic platforms, and there's one under each tire, and then there's 3 additional ones that do loading on the chassis itself to simulate aero load and inertial loads. And the idea is that you shake the car with these hydraulic rams as it would be on the racetrack. And you can tune the suspension and the dampers kind of around that to try and optimize them.
Okay.
So that's...
Our listeners are just going to say world's first motion rig.
Kinda, yeah. I mean, and there were people, I remember a driver coming into our 7-post rig at PPI, and he's like, you know what? This should be driver in the loop. What are you guys doing? And I'm like, driver in the loop what? Because this was 1999. There was no such thing as driver in the loop. I was like, dude, you're just on crack. Go away. But, I mean, it turns out that's a huge thing now, and I just missed the boat. It's all right.
You developed some relationships with the drivers at that point too, right?
At that time, I didn't go to the racetrack.
Okay.
So when I was at PPI, I guess one of the other things I did there was I was on the test team. So I was a test team assistant engineer. So I went and I did data and worked with the drivers then. But that was kind of a side role. I wasn't the primary engineer. And at JAG, I only went to one race.
Where was that?
Montreal. And I did a couple tests, one in Barcelona and one in Jerez in Spain. But for the most part, I was factory-based when I was in... first time around in IndyCar and then in F1.
So moving from Jaguar, where did you progress from there?
So Jaguar, so there were some family things that happened, like my daughter was born and we decided to move back to the States. So we did that in the middle of 2002. And I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. And I ended up contacting one of my friends from PPI who was technical director on a Formula Atlantic team here in the U.S. And I was like, hey, I'm looking. And he's like, well, I got something. So he had an opening.
Funny how those things tend to work.
Right? Yeah, that's kind of the way racing goes, really. Racing jobs go. He had an opening for a race engineer. And so I jumped at it. And so that year was 2003. The team was Roosport. And we had AJ Allmendinger in one car and Aaron Justice, who no one has heard of, but who's actually a really good guy, in the other car. And probably fortunately for AJ had like the experienced engineer, and I worked with Aaron Justice. and AJ just dominated that season at Atlantics, and it was a great experience for me learning. It was the first time I'd really been a race engineer, so primary with the driver, and it was a great learning experience.
I can hear Chris on the radio, the super calm race engineer voice, just, giving exactly what you need, no emotion. I can hear that.
Yeah, there was, I tried to be pretty, I mean, all right, when they made really big overtakes, I'd give a whoop, but for the most part, a whoop. A whoop. Yeah, just a whoop. But for the most part,
passes for the lead. Whoop.
Nice one. Yeah, no, I tried to be pretty even keeled on the radio, because drivers can be pretty. AJ is not the calmest guy in the world. Let's admit it. So kind of keeping things in check. That was important.
And then how did that progress into where you are now?
So Roosport then went to Champ Cars, and I went with them. So I was with Rusport for those who don't know, and probably that's most people these days. Carl Russo was a wealthy businessman from Silicon Valley, and he wanted to start a race team, and it was Rusport. And I was with they existed from 2002 through 2007, and I was with them throughout their whole time in motorsports. We did 1 year of Atlantics and the rest of the time in Champ Cars. And so 4 through 7 was working on Champ Cars. First year I was an assistant engineer, and after that I race engineered.
Who were you race engineering for then?
So I did the Dinger. I race engineered AJ Allmendinger from 2005 through early 2006.
Oh, super cool.
And then Cristiano D'Amata as well when AJ left. Sadly, I was engineering Cristiano when he and the Deer came together at Road America in 2006, which was one of the worst motorsports days of my life. But that's part of the deal.
Yeah.
Why I'm happy to see the aero screen.
The aero screen.
Yeah, we were just talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
So there's some pictures of it.
Yep.
And I think you and I agree. We're pleased to see the safety advancements.
Absolutely.
Regardless of what they look like.
Right. Aesthetics aside, couldn't be happier that they're going that direction.
Moving into 2020, there's no reason for a head to be sitting out at 200 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Anybody that says that argues against that, I would like to get their head checked. But so moving on, how did you end up actually at iRacing?
So there's actually a couple.
A few more steps in there. I know you did some sports car stuff, right?
There are a couple more steps, and I did so after Champ Car folded. I kind of dialed back a little bit on the intensity level and did, must have been 4 or 5 years of flying engineering in sports cars, doing Porsche Cup cars and IMSA.
It's funny how all these cars that you've worked on we have in
have,
iRacing.
right?
It's pretty cool.
And firsthand experience
Right.
and putting them together.
And a GS class BMW M3 for Fall Line Motorsports, which is a great group. Still miss them. Love the sports car paddock. It's just an awesome place to be. I mean, if you work in the industry, sports car paddock doesn't really get a lot better than that. It's just chill and fun, and people are just kind of there for the right reasons. So
It's not necessarily as money driven, more about the competition,
or well, it is. It's money driven, like
There's
anything
still
in
plenty of money
motorsports. Yeah, but it's people are there to. It's people who are there to have fun. It's not like you're there because you need to dominate the world. You're there because you want to have fun with motorsports. You're not mistaking motorsports for curing cancer or going to the moon. You're there to enjoy it, and it's as entertaining for the people who are in the paddock as it is for the few people who watch it. Probably more so, actually. It's just it's a piece of the motorsports world that I definitely miss inhabiting. Let's put it.
It
that
really
way.
is a community. Like you go to the IMSA paddock and
Everybody knows everybody.
People move around, and I walk through the paddock now, and it's just every 5 minutes I'm saying hello to somebody that I know that I've worked with or have interacted somehow, and you've done a lot longer than I have, so it must be crazy for you when you.
Yeah, I can't walk through a paddock and not spend 25 minutes to 4 hours chatting with the people that I know. So it's yeah.
When's the last time you went to a sports car race?
Oh, it's been a while now. Actually, well, last year I did a Trans Am race with Fall Line at Watkins Glen.
Oh.
So that was.
It's not too far away.
Nope, not at all. Familiar track.
So moving from BMW, where did the next step take you?
So there was a couple of there was a false start with iRacing. So I interviewed. I came out to Massachusetts. I was living in Colorado at the time because that's where Rusport was based. But I came out. I think it was in 2008. Talked to Dave Kemmer and Steve Myers and Tony Gardner, and it looked like it was all going to go. And then I said, no, I want to stay in Colorado. And they said, we really want you here. So that was a false start. And I carried on and did the sports cars. And then in late 2012, Ian Berwick, who was my immediate predecessor as a vehicle dynamicist here at iRacing, was ready to move on to other things. And as it turned out, I was ready to kind of get off the road.
He actually went back to the paddock because I see him at all the IMSA races. It's kind of funny.
And he moved to Colorado, so it's like,
did you sell him your house? I mean, did it work? You had to trade?
Yeah, no, no. But so it was just really great timing because, I mean, I wanted to spend more time at home. I had, the family was growing up, and I wanted to spend more time with the kids, and it was just a great opportunity to come here to iRacing and kind of shift the focus to something that's, the thing that I love about iRacing is that if you're working in the paddock, you kind of have like a customer base of a few people. You got to make your drivers happy, you got to make the crew happy, you got to make the team owners happy. At iRacing, my customer base is tens of thousands, getting close to 100,000 people, and that's the scale of that is really kind of cool. For me, that's a big distinction between working in the paddock and working in a company like iRacing is, we're just available to a lot more people.
Is that a positive or a negative stressor? Because you being one of the three, gurus that make the car feel like it should feel.
Well, see, the thing is, I don't spend a lot of time on the forums, so
it's a bad place. Don't go there.
For me, it's a positive. I mean, there's good. Obviously, there's goods and bads to both, but on the whole, I really like it feels kind of like a more democratic place. We're a lot more accessible than real world racing, and it's nice to have that impact where you can touch more people. The work that you do has an impact on a larger group.
Let's talk about the meat and potatoes of what people are really hoping to hear about. Let's talk about what you're working on right now.
All right.
Pretty excited about this. We just recently announced it. I think you're working on one of the supercars right now, right?
Yeah. So the Aussies asked us to do an update. So the last time we did a supercar was in 2014. So we're working on the 2019 car now, and it's great. The Supercar series has been an awesome partner. They've provided great data, and hopefully access to real world drivers and engineers. And so I've been kind of gradually, slowly turning our 14 car into a 19 car. And it feels like every step of the way, it's getting better and better. And it's, I don't think it's any secret that our older supercars are very, very difficult to drive.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that.
Yeah, I know. I don't know who got that idea. But the 19 car seems to be heading in a direction where it's a lot more accessible and it's a lot more fun, and it just kind of feels more like a race car should. And a lot of that, goes down to the tires and Dave's work on the tire model. It's all been developed around the V7 tires, and the preliminary feedback is that that is a huge step forward.
You gave me the wonderful finger quotes bad idea of taking it in our test environment, and I took it around the Bathurst the other night, and that was actually a lot of fun. After I bend it the first 6 times before I could complete a lap, but once I completed a lap, it was a ton of fun. There's so much power underneath your foot, but you really if you're graceful with your right foot, there's a lot of control there as well.
Yeah, I mean I think the big thing that we've gained with the V7 tires is being able to feel what it's doing out and over the limit. You can slide the car more and you can get it back, and you can push the car. You can really push it to its limits, and you can get it over it and not crash, and you can dial it back and kind of optimize it for lap time. And I think crashing the first 6 times up the hill at Bathurst is just that's how that goes. You're gonna do it.
That's just Bathurst.
But once you get, once you figure out where it's going and the walls that you're not supposed to hit, it's Bathurst is so much fun.
As opposed to the walls you're supposed to hit.
Right.
Right. Exactly. Because you do.
So tell us more about the process, just in general. So people say, well, how long does it take to build a car? What goes into it? There's obviously multiple teams that work on it, right? You don't work on any of the graphics, so any of the look of the car is not from you or your coworkers. But the physics side, assuming we got all the data that we needed in one shot, which usually doesn't happen, but let's say we all had it. We got it on September 1st, all the data that we could possibly use. How long does it usually take to build a car?
Well, the thing is, that's changed a lot. In the 5 years that I've been at iRacing, that's changed a ton. So when I started, it was pretty simple. It was probably 3 or 4 weeks to do a car. Now that's creeping up closer to 2 months. The updated collision system has added a bit. The way we handle the displays has gotten more sophisticated. And then AI as well coming in. It's added quite a bit to the dev process. So I think we're closer to 2 months now.
Right. And the reality is it's probably longer than that because we don't always get all of the data on day one. So it's
Yeah, I mean, and the other piece of that is, I mean, it's very rare that I can dedicate 100% of my time to any one project. So I'm always bouncing around between stuff. So the reality is, while it might, be 2 months dedicated on a car, the reality is that turns into 3 months, 4 months. I mean, I probably already am from the start of the work on the supercars. That was about 3 months ago.
So when you first get a car, we have a drivable model, and you're day one. Okay, it's time to start shaking this thing down. Where do you go? Where's your track?
Depends on the car. If it's a GT or a sports car, I'll go to Road Atlanta. If it's a supercar, I'll go to Phillip Island because I can do that without crashing every lap.
not as many walls, or they're not as close anyway.
I try to pick a track that suits a car, or track where we have data for a particular car, so I can work on correlation. So
lap
for example,
times and things like that.
Yeah. So for example, when we did the F3 car, we had logged data. We had logged data from Snetterton, so that was pretty much the track that I did the dev on the F3 car for.
Did you have to learn the track, or did you already know it?
I had no idea. No, that was like a day
Right.
of you just sitting there watching me. Dude, what does he do besides drive all day?
Why does he crash?
Every lap. Yeah, that was me trying to figure out which way it went.
So do you have a favorite car that you've built? Or is it hard to, they're all different?
Well, usually the favorite car is the last one you did.
Fair enough.
Kind of like like the F1 teams. Favorite car I've ever done.
I didn't know if there was one because you had a personal connection to it that you've worked on it, or
I mean, the Audi R8. I did some real world work on. The first car I did, which was the BMW Z4. That's always going to have a special place. The F3 car was a lot of fun. I mean, right now, of course, the supercars, which is my current, that's, since it's right in my face, it's one of my faves.
I feel like, and I only did a handful of laps in the test environment the other night, but I feel like that there's going to be a revival on iRacing with those cars because they are fun.
I hope that's right.
They're out of the mainstream of American and European culture, but go turn a couple laps. And if it doesn't bring a smile to your face between the sound and the sliding, and then you're not. I don't think you're a real racing fan. It's a lot of fun. So
yeah,
and it's only going to get better. All right, let's change a little bit now. You self-proclaimed coffee snob,
dude. Don't even.
Oh,
all right. So here's the deal. Here's the deal. No, I'm not a coffee snob. You can drink whatever you want. I don't care. But that's not what I'm going to drink.
You have turned your nose up to my Dunkin' Donuts coffee more than once.
I am not even going to touch that. So I prefer to think of it as being entirely too OCD about my coffee, like really OCD about it.
Walk us through it. So some people have like a coffee grinder at their house and they're really proud of their French press or whatnot.
I learned I had the wrong kind of coffee grinder.
Me too, and I have a really nice one.
If you have a whirly blade, it's not good.
You were kind enough to bring me some of your freshly home roasted beans, which were fantastic. You said, "Oh, these aren't my best, but here, try them." So I did, and I went home and I made an espresso. Came back and I drank it the way I usually drink it, which is I drop a cube of sugar in, I stir it up, and you. I didn't tell you that. I just said
it's just wrong.
And he said, "Well, what'd you think?"
wrong.
And I said, "Oh, it was good." And he said, "Well, did you taste the layers of it as you're drinking it?" And I'm thinking, maybe I shouldn't have stirred it. I guess I didn't have any layers.
He asked me what I thought, and he's like, "Well, what did you taste?" And I was like, "I didn't taste it. It wasn't a flavor; it was a color." And I stand by that. But we're getting off topic here a little bit. So Chris actually roasts his own beans. Some people grind their own coffee. Chris really takes it another step.
Right. So I pretty much from there are companies that sell green coffee in the U.S. and all over the world, I suppose. But so I buy my coffee green. I've got my roaster. I've got my laptop. I log the data from the roast.
Do you use the old logger that you created for a Jaguar
No,
F1?
no, there's
He built a custom one.
yeah, no, there's software out there for it, so I use it. So I log that. I do the roast. I let it sit. I let it rest. And then I have a grinder that could easily look just perfectly in place in a medical lab. And my espresso machine, because I love espresso, that's what I drink. I mean, it's coffee, but I like espresso, and that's what I almost always have. Is laptop driven and the infinitely adjustable brew profiles and.
Didn't you make your first roaster out of a popcorn?
So
machine?
exactly. So I wasn't really sure if this was going to work. So and so I'm like, I don't want to invest anything in this. I'll just get So it was just an air popper. I think the coffee. No, I think it gave you coffee.
I think
from
you'd
the drum.
upgraded at that point.
It was a drum roaster. So yeah, I mean, and I'd modified a popper, and it was the hot rod popper, and I could have like burned the house down with it. But so it's probably good that only lasted about a month before I figured, the OCD kicked in, and I upgraded to a drum roaster.
That's yeah. I had you brought me in a jar of beans, and then Leslie and I had a little tasting at the house, and that was very much enjoyable. Way better than the Dunkin' Donuts brand.
You're killing our chance of getting a sponsor here from Dunkin' Donuts, though.
Yeah, well, if that's what kills it. Anyway. Well, Chris, thank you very much for making time for us this afternoon. We do appreciate it. This has been thoroughly enjoyable. I think that story time on the iRacing Downshift is something that our listeners really enjoy. So thanks for taking the time. We appreciate it. And back to the show. All right, always fun catching up with one of the iRacing employees that makes things happen behind the scenes. But moving on to our real-world recap. This was kind of a big one for us, Chris. NASCAR at the Roval. Why was the Roval such a big deal for both NASCAR and iRacing?
Well, Greg, the reason why the Roval was such a big deal for us, certainly, is because we managed to get that chicane update in, that backstretch chicane, before they actually had a chance to run it in the real world. So that was really cool. I mean, we saw our final peak playoff race before the championship race on the Charlotte Roval. It was the first time that the Peak Series had the Charlotte Roval on the schedule, but really exciting, really dramatic, also a playoff cutoff race for the Cup Series. Chase Elliott, I mean, what can you say about... First of all, I got to give Chase all the credit in the world for the burnout that he did after the
burnout
victory.
was great. The burnout was epic.
If you can poke fun at yourself that way, then, all the credit in the world to you. I mean, that was a phenomenal drive back from missing turn one. But
yeah, for those of you that weren't watching, we had a couple weeks ago we had the spin and win from Truex. This week we had the bin and win from Chase Elliott. Just forgets to turn left into turn one. You see him lock it up.
This kind of brings up the throw and go tease again. Like maybe there's some hope for you, but.
If you all could see Greg's face right now.
I can't tell you where I want you to go. Mainly because I don't want to bleep it out in post-production. But yeah, Chase Elliott bins it in turn one, gets in the pits. The crew does a fantastic job getting that hood smashed back down. Luckily, he doesn't have any major radiator damage or anything. And then Chris, take it away.
And then drives right back through the field, takes that checkered flag. I mean, if you can recover from an incident, certainly an embarrassing one like that one. I mean, I feel like we see this every year now with a top driver, just somebody who... We've got Kevin taking a selfie while I'm trying to do this race recap. But, just a driver who's able to drive back through the field like that, take that victory. I mean, we've been talking about Martin Truex really being the guy to beat in the playoffs right now, but throw some momentum Chase Elliott's way. If you're able to recover from something like that, then I think you're a threat at Homestead. I think you can recover from just about anything.
I mean, off topic a little bit, but he also has an amazing level of athleticism. We saw after the burnout when he forgot to put the car in gear, and it's rolling away with him standing on the door and picking up steam.
That was the coolest part.
And he just owned it. Just absolutely. And then his maybe less athletic running after the car. I guess it can't be easy to run with a Hansa Vice, but it was better looking than Max Verstappen posting pictures of him running this week. So confirmed Chase Elliott more athletic than Max Verstappen.
Wow.
Speaking of the Hendrick crew, though, all the credit in the world to Alex Bowman as well for being able to snake that final playoff position. Drove up to second. He had not been strong the first couple of weeks of the playoffs, and he even said it himself in one of the interviews, like, look, if this is how we're going to perform, then I got to admit we don't deserve to move on. But I think everybody at that team took that comment to heart. I don't think anybody took offense to that. I think they realized, look, we just got to work a little harder, and drove through the field. And then, of course, Alex had a little bit of drama after the race, didn't he?
Well, you see, he gave it his all, and I know Bubba Wallace came up to him afterwards and, wanted to cool him off. He's overheated. They're sitting on the floor, and Bubba Wallace, graciously offering his water bottle.
Shared it with Jeff Gordon, too, I understand.
Oh, well, I didn't know that, but...
Apparently he was there in the crowd there and got a little water.
Well, he's a giver, Bubba Wallace. Real class act. Moving on, let's talk about Alexander Rossi and James Hinchcliffe. They have something that kind of ties into what Chris was talking about a little while ago. Other Chris, not this Chris. You can't see me pointing right now, but that's all good. But they're going to be racing at the Bathurst 1000. Chris, you know a lot about it?
Oh, this is so cool. It's always awesome to see the IndyCar drivers head down back to Australia. I know it's been a long time since we've had an IndyCar race at Surfers Paradise, but you see so many IndyCar drivers show up for the 1000. And this one, you've got Alexander Rossi and you've got James Hinchcliffe. They've teamed up. They're with Walkinshaw Andretti United in that Holden. And Rossi shared just a hilarious photo to anybody who has, followed IndyCar and seen Hinch and, his suits over the years. Hinch in the Napa suit is just...
I thought it was a joke.
Yeah, no,
I
it
thought
looks
it was a complete joke.
It looks like an April Fool's joke. You're waiting to see Rossi step out in an aero suit, but no, they are racing with Napa Auto Parts backing on that car. It's going to be really cool to see how they do in the 1000. And I know that we've obviously stepped up our efforts with supercars. You've got the Gfinity supercars, and there it is. And
the power of Twitter. I pulled up the picture.
The power of Twitter and the red shoes, and I'm sure he's going to have the red gloves, and the red gloves are going to look fantastic with that suit. That third Napa color in there. Don't mind me. I'm a color
You're
nerd.
A fanboy, apparently.
My girlfriend went to art school. Sue me.
Fair enough. All right, let's move on to the week ahead. We have another exciting World Championship Series previewing this weekend. IRX going to debut at Atlanta. Chris, tell us about it. We're in Chris's wheelhouse right now.
We are in my wheelhouse.
Chris, you know something about rallycross, don't you?
I might.
I thought you killed rallycross.
Well, I've revived it. Just
Excellent.
In time for spooky season. I brought it back from the dead. No, I'm kidding. Thrustmaster iRacing Rallycross World Championship. We've got 25.
Ding.
I need to know. I brought up the stupid bell idea. I should know to pause. But $25,000 on the line. Thrustmaster has stepped up in a huge way to promote this series, and we've got a few real-world drivers that are getting involved as well. Defending series champion Mitchell DeYoung, a real-world supercar driver and a real-world lights champion. Set promotion with Sammy Matty. He is a real-world driver that has run in the RX Light Series over in Europe, but we've also got some of the drivers who run over here in ARX are getting involved with teams. Patrick Sandell, who drives for Subaru Motorsports USA, he's partnering with Apex Racing Team. They're going to have 4 cars in the grid. Cabot Bigham, who is Scott Speed's replacement in Andretti Rallycross when Scott made the switch to Subaru. Cabot's going to have a couple of drivers repping him. Lowenbro Motorsports with Steve Arpin is going to have a car on the grid. And this has been really cool. I mean, for me, that's kind of a homecoming because these are guys who I worked with for, 5-6 years over at GRC while we still had GRC. But, Patrick, Cabot, Steve have all just been super supportive and really excited to help promote things. And also the Lights Championship leaders, Dirtfish Motorsports. Dirtfish is going to be on a couple of cars with Jim Beaver Esports, which is one of the teams on our Peak Series grid. I believe Williams is also involved with at least 1 or 2 drivers. It's going to be a really deep, really stacked IRX grid, and I can't wait to see the debut of Atlanta on the IRX schedule this Saturday.
Those races are always just sheer chaos, too, because there's, they're always on the limit and, a little over the limit. So good door banging action and going to be fun to watch. You can catch that on the iRacing Esports Network kicking off this weekend. But moving on, we also got another USAC race coming up. Chris, you're the expert of things on dirt. Tell us more about that.
Yep, Eldora Speedway, the next race on the USAC schedule. It's going to be really exciting to see those non-winged sprint cars taking on the half mile. like we said earlier, we started the season with a lot of bull rings. We had the debut of Fairbury American Legion Speedway as a
Ding!
It throws me off every time, and it's my own fault. But debut of Fairbury as a world championship event, and that's also going to be the season closer. But really exciting to see what these guys have in store at Eldora. I know a lot of these drivers have won at Eldora and other dirt oval series that we have, so I think it's going to be one of the most competitive races of the year.
You said that all without running out of breath. You're really, really close, though. All right, moving on. NASCAR going to Dover. This is a playoff round of 12. So, Chris, tell us about that.
Yep,
Is
Dover.
this the Chris podcast or something?
Do you know much about this?
No.
Okay. You're good. You know about the things that turn right. Chris knows
yeah.
about the things that turn left. I'm just here to keep things going.
It's the Chris and Chris show today, isn't it?
Basically.
Well, we'll have to put that in the copy. Another playoff round starts for the Cup Series. Another playoff round, closes for the Xfinity Series. It's going to be a cutoff race for them. 4 drivers are going to be eliminated, but the Cup drivers, they have that opportunity just to sort of try and guarantee themselves back into the round of 8 as we keep moving forward. I mean, we talked about Martin Truex and Chase Elliott a little earlier, and frankly, I think those are going to be the guys to beat again now. Joe Gibbs Racing has been strong throughout, and I do think that Kyle Busch has a win in this round, but I still think you got to lean towards Truex and Elliott as the favorites this weekend.
I would agree with that. I'm kind of Clint Boyer fanboying a little bit, so I'm kind of hoping he pulls it together. I grew up near where Clint grew up, so would like to see him put one together and see if he can get him a championship. Speaking of NASCAR, though, we have big news for Pete coming next week on NBCSN. Kevin, tell us about it.
Wow, I can
Welcome
finally
back.
talk again. I'm here. Yeah, so the NASCAR Peak Antifreeze iRacing Series. Did I get that right?
Ding!
Oh, right. So, right. Is obviously going to be live broadcast on the NBC Sports Network next Thursday, not Tuesday. It's at 5 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. So it's super exciting for us. We've talked about it before. We've had a couple of all-star races already, and they've gone really well. This is the first official Peak Series race. So
This is a full-length one. This
full
is not.
length,
This is not the
yeah,
little hour-long.
We got a
one.
2-hour window to get this in.
Parker's not going to be there to crash everybody out. I mean,
He will be there, but
He
not
will be
driving.
there.
So, good news is we're also going to be able to stream it. So if you're not in the U.S. and can't get the NBC Sports Network broadcast, you can still watch it. But everybody in the U.S., tune into NBC Sports Network. It's going to be fantastic to have this season finale. One of 4 drivers is going to walk home with, what, $40,000?
cash is king.
Plus weekly winnings.
Plus weekly
Don't
winnings.
forget those weekly winnings.
Not bad, though. We have come so far since I joined this company, and to have this on a major sports channel like that is simply amazing. Tons of work going into this to make it happen. Again, people don't get to see the inside and the backroom stuff that's going on.
They
all
don't
the
get to
technical
see
stuff.
Drew's new button box.
Yeah, Drew does have quite the
Things like 4
the
feet
broadcast
wide.
board, but anyway, there's a ton going on to make it happen. Really appreciate the support from NBC and NASCAR to make this happen. Without their support, we couldn't have gotten this done. So tune in next week. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, really exciting to see this live on NBC Sports Network. Remember, like Kevin said, Thursday instead of Tuesday, but we are going to be writing a couple of pretty big checks at the end of it.
Yeah,
so.
and I think that there'll be probably an office party in here watching it. Maybe we'll order some pizza up. What do you guys think? Some pepperoni or
I could do that.
beverage
a
choice.
beverage or two? Maybe a Mountain Dew, a water, something
Steve
like that.
will drink Mountain Dew.
Mountain
or
Dew.
Red Bull.
Ugh, I'll take a crab juice.
All right, it is time. Kevin, let me have it.
The throw and go. Wow.
I'm
I think
leaving in shame.
I think we missed it one week. We had it last week.
Leaving.
And last week, I think or last episode, Greg had a DNF. This week was looking more promising. My horrible throw with the dart actually hit the board on the first toss this week, which was solid. But I ended up with not our favorite car.
Not our favorite car to drive on the road.
Well,
Fun on an oval.
Fun on an oval. So we had the Whelen modified, which is it's got a lot of tire, that's for sure.
And a big air cooler.
Yeah, it's hard to see those apexes when you're turning right.
Ask me how I know.
Yeah. So anyway, one special note: the we always run the baseline setup. That doesn't pass tech at the Nürburgring. So we'll make a note in the description of the podcast on what we did to make it pass, which was simply click a few buttons until it passed.
It's like 3 clicks.
We're not really sure what we did to the car, but it did pass tech.
We should have got Chris. He's the setup. Not you, not this Chris. Other Chris.
But anyway,
yeah, you don't want me setting up your car.
Yeah. So we did it. Things were going well for about a quarter of the lap. When did you bin it? You put it in the wall again.
Yeah, I didn't see that big curb on the right side because the air cooler.
It's funny how the track hasn't changed, though. We've been running this for 11 episodes now, and the corner's in the same spot.
It's true. All 140 something.
Yeah, anyway, another DNF for Greg. I did finish with I think a 7:10.
No,
and change.
It was 8.
No, 7:10.
You said there was a 7-minute lap
I don't know.
It was an 8:10.
It was probably a 5 something.
I think it was an 8:08:56.
It actually doesn't matter because I won. So.
Do we have a running tally on who's won?
We don't need one. Kevin Lotz, me won.
Yeah.
Okay, you won.
Let's see. There's been 11 episodes of the podcast now. It's 10-1.
10-1. So anyway, give it a go. It's pretty fun. The car actually handles better than I thought on the Nordschleife. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad.
It's got so much rubber.
It's hard to see, but it was pretty fun.
I mean, in fairness, the mods have run at Watkins Glen in the past. It's not like they've never run a road course before. They just haven't run that one.
It doesn't have enough.
But
gear.
when they didn't have enough gear, but we also didn't have it was not a symmetrical setup. It was set to turn left. The carousel was fantastic.
No, absolutely. Yeah, Chris, absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the iRacing Downshift. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else that podcasts are found. If you want it somewhere and it's not there, let us know, and Chris will do his best to get it there. He's the one that puts them all up. But for Greg West, Chris Leone, and Kevin Bobbitt, I'm messed up the exit, but that's fine. We'll see you at the track.
Just like at the ring.
See you next time.